The idea that Justin Morrill and his congressional colleagues had was that education, part of democracy is that education should be accessible to all. And at the time, of course, most people were living in a rural context. There were city dwellers, but the bulk of folks were situated in rural environments, most of them involved with subsistence level farming as the primary way of feeding themselves and their families. So the land-grant institution was founded to serve those people. It existed with three design principles. One was to provide vocational training for the American populace so that they could contribute to the economy. The second principle was that it provided a civic education so people would become effective citizens in the democracy. So they had the training they needed, vocational skills to make a living. They had the civic skills they needed to be informed citizens, to exercise their rights and engagement in a democracy. And the third underpinning was associated with the liberal education. So what did it take to be an educated person? What were the basic sort of skills that you needed to be an educated and informed citizen? And so it was those three design principles that led to the initial sort of formulation of what people would be educated like at a land-grant university.
The point is that the university has determined important technologies to develop, one seen as pivotal for modernizing and competing in historically important agricultural industries within states. And what a social scientist is to do is to tell the university, tell the production scientists, the agricultural engineers, how to get farmers on board, how to engineer social acceptance of the technologies. The technologies themselves are, they're de facto, they're there. They have sprung forward, and our mission as social scientists is to legitimate them in some fashion. I'm struck by how, as the college positions itself within the university overall, and also within the state, trying to make a case for what we're about, that it's often in terms of feeding, but it's not feeding the world. There's a lot of talk about feeding the future. And this is interesting. I see this framing in some ways looking both outward and inward. The outward part is very much an embrace of what's going on right now in terms of much more heated debate and discussion about the specter of global food insecurity and the reasons for global food insecurity in light of climate change, bioenergy development, declining public investment, and so on and so forth, population growth, geopolitical interests. But the inward piece of this feeding the future may speak to how, as a college, my institution is talking about we feed our future in a time of public investment, and that we're looking for support from the state by speaking to that way of, or to that need that we have to feed our future for institutional survival.
One thing that has held my department together through some very difficult discussions and times has been the recognition that we are all interested in food. And that we can all relate what we do to food, and we try to keep our eyes focused on the food and not on the differences in our different paradigms. And I'm frustrated with the way, with disciplinarity. The disciplines were created in a different world. They were created in 19th century Germany. And the way that 19th century Germans divided the world up is not really functional in the 21st century. It just doesn't make any sense anymore.
When you consider the meanings laid on to this term feeding, if we take that one and then also think about the term the world, it's a transitive verb, so it's all about giving, producing, providing, serving food. And in that, I think we have to really focus on the kind of relationship between the feeder and the one being fed. And as with most social relationships, feeding may not always be as simple and as straightforward as it initially seems.